Right. So stablecoins. I've been introduced before. Thank you, George, for that. So I think I'm going to skip this. Right. So I think everybody has seen this slide before. This is the evolution of money. This is how we went from a barter economy where people were changing goods for other goods via many transformations to paper money, to cards, to digital fiat, and of course, to cryptocurrency. Right, so what exactly is money? Well, first of all, it has to be a standard, an agreed standard upon which debt can be settled. It has to be a practical medium of exchange, which is exactly what killed barter. We price everything into the same currency, and then we don't have to switch commodity for commodity. We can do it via currencies. It has to be a unit of account, which facilitates valuation and calculation. And of course, it has to be a store of value, which allows transactions to happen over long periods of time and distances. Here's what money must exhibit in order to be considered sound. It has to be durable. It has to stand the test of time. It has to be portable. You cannot carry 1 ton of a mineral easily. It has to be divisible, which is you have to be able to break it down into smaller parts and transact with it. It has to be uniform, has to be a primary currency that's in use and not multiple. Its supply should be limited and controlled. It cannot be printed at will and reproduced. And it has, of course, to be accepted by everyone in that specific market. So here's something that some of you might know, some might not. This is called the impossible trinity. This is it's called the Mundell-Fleming trilemma. What this says is that any asset can only be 2 of those at the same time. It cannot be all 3. So you can have a free capital flow and fixed exchange rate, but then you cannot have a sovereign monetary policy. You can have a fixed exchange rate and a sovereign monetary policy, but you cannot have free capital flow and the other option. As an example, for example, free capital flow and fixed exchange rate, which means option A, is used, for example, by the Eurozone. The states do not have a sovereign monetary policy, but we have free capital flow and fixed exchange rates throughout the Eurozone. Another example, for example, for C, this is something that China does. They have a fixed exchange rate, they have a sovereign monetary policy, they can control their own fiat, but they control and don't have free capital flows in and out of China. I'm only showing this because there's a stablecoin equivalent of this triangle, which we're going to see later on. So here's the problem, volatility. While cryptocurrencies are, for me, the biggest revolution of our age, and it's going to completely transform the financial landscape, yet the volatility is a major barrier for mass adoption. It has been, and it still is. Here's an example. The green line and the red line, they are the exchange rate between US dollar and euro. And of course, the black one is BTC towards the years. So you can see the difference here. There's also this old joke that can drive the point home. There's a boy asking his dad for a Bitcoin, and he goes, within a second, there's 3 different prices for Bitcoin because of volatility. So without stability, it will always be extremely risky for mainstream people and businesses to adopt cryptocurrencies and make the transition from traditional assets and traditional markets. And this is exactly where stablecoins come in. Stablecoins, they combine the benefits of cryptocurrencies, which are transparency, security, immutability, speed, cost, and privacy, without, or at least aiming to, without losing the guarantees of trust and stability that normal fiat currencies provide. They have the potential to bring benefits to many industries and individuals that need to make international payments quickly and securely. And this is the proof of the need and demand for something like this. It was basically non-existent until very recently, and it has exploded since. So what are some of the potential use cases of stablecoins? They can be used for remittances. They can be used as a store of value. They can be used as a medium of exchange. They can be used in lending very easily. They can be used to tokenize specific precious metals. And they can be used very easily into decentralized applications that will make automatic payments. Let's see a few of those in some more detail. So they can become an everyday currency. They can be used as a normal currency, just like digital money. They can be used for online payments, for shop payments, and overseas payments, and everything like that. They can be used, of course, for peer-to-peer payment, just like cryptocurrencies themselves, just with bigger security because of stability. And they can be used on smart contracts to make recurring payments. And this is widely used in online commerce and on payroll. They can be used for remittances, just like the other cryptocurrencies, but then you ensure that the value of the money you sent will most probably be exactly the same at both the origin and destination points of the transaction. And lastly, and most probably this is the one that it's most used now, it's a hedging mechanism for traders. Before stablecoins, traders had to sell their cryptocurrencies on exchanges for fiat and maybe withdraw those to the banks, which is a lengthy process. Using stablecoins, you can streamline this and you can cash out, but without really cashing out, and keep your equivalent fiat value at hand to re-enter the market really fast. So here's that explosion of stablecoins I was talking about before. As you can see, most of them are based in the United States, but not only, it's all over the world. Some of them are specific to the countries they are at, but most of them are global. Here's a timeline. As you can see, Newbit, BitShares, and Tether were the first ones. Very different models, those three. We'll talk about that later. Some in 2015, 2016, and from 2018 on, there's been an explosion. There's over 60 now. They wouldn't fit the picture, of course. Tether remains the dominant stablecoin still, even though it has a lot of controversy regarding its transparency. And however, the rest of the stablecoins, I think, are slowly catching up. As we can see here, these are the exchange listings of the major ones. As you can see, Tether has the most. True USD by Trust Token is the second biggest one, and the rest follow. This is another view of that. It used to be just Tether up to early 2018. There's been a dent in the volume of Tethers, mainly from Trust Token, but not only. But as you can see, it's still very high and very dominant. This shows the rest of the stablecoins competing each other without Tether. So as you can see, True USD is the main one, the main competitor, and Paxos is also having quite a bit of volume here. And another way of looking at that. So are those stablecoins really stable? Well, one can claim that yes, they are, and they have been fluctuations, but those are nothing compared to the cryptocurrencies themselves. As you can see, they've been down to 0.97, they've been up to 1.03, which is actually exactly how it's supposed to be, because for most of those coins, especially the fiat-backed ones, the peg is being held by arbitrators, seeing an opportunity when it goes a little below $1 for a nice trade, and then selling at a few cents more. Here's the Trinity that I was talking about before, but on 4 stablecoins. So as you can see, a stablecoin can be self-sovereign and backed, but it cannot be stable. It can be stable and self-sovereign, but it cannot be backed. And it can be stable and backed, but it cannot be self-sovereign. And the sides of the triangle are showing you the 3 types of stablecoins regarding to those characteristics. Sorry. So stablecoins must, at all costs, retain their peg. The peg, if you don't know what it is the actual equivalent. They have to be, for example, $1 at all times. And this is the questions that someone can ask when evaluating a stablecoin. How much volatility can the peg withstand? Is it resistant to big downward selling pressures? How expensive it is for the system to maintain the peg? How easy it is to analyze the actual system, that the workings underneath the cryptocurrency, the stablecoin, and how transparent it is. So therefore, an ideal stablecoin should be able to withstand a great deal of market volatility. It should be cheap to maintain. It should be easy to explain and analyze the parameters of the system. And of course, most importantly, it should be very transparent to traders and arbitrators. So we have 4 types of stablecoins. We have fiat collateralized, commodity collateralized, crypto collateralized, and non-collateralized. I'll go in depth to those. So let's start with fiat. The value is pegged to one or more fiat currencies. The peg is realized off-chain via banks, other types of institutions that will serve as depositories of the currency used to back the stablecoin. For example, Tether's bank will have to hold the dollars that Tether has in circulation. The fiat reserves have to reflect the circulating supply of the stablecoin 1-to-1, 100%. There has to be a lot of trust in the actual custodian of the backing asset, which is the team of that coin, but also the underlying financial institutions, the banks, the auditors, and everything. So the cost of maintaining the stability of that stablecoin is equivalent to the cost of maintaining the backing reserve and the cost of the legal, audit, and business infrastructure required. Examples of those stablecoins are, of course, Tether, True USD, Paxos, USDC, which is by Circle, GUSD by Gemini, Stasis, which has a euro-pegged stablecoin, and others. So the advantages, to summarize, fiat-backed stablecoins are simple, very easy to understand. It's just 1-to-1 to a reserve asset held at some bank. And they are considered stable since the underlying asset is considered stable. because it's backed by governments and the economy. Of course, we all know that this is not always the case, but this is the theory. The disadvantages, first of all, they are totally centralized. They are being issued by one central party, and they're prone to all the problems that might happen to that entity, to that central entity. It requires a lot of trust, which is a bit opposite to the whole spirit of cryptocurrencies in general, because the people working in the space, they're trying to make as trustless an environment as they can. And they're very prone to regulations by central authorities, national and international. So commodity-backed stablecoins, the second category, they are very similar to fiat-backed. Just instead of some fiat currency, they are backed by precious metals, gold, silver, etc. They can be pegged to one or more exchange-traded commodities in a fixed ratio. There's actually one that is pegged to 7 different ones at the same time with percentages of each. That's pretty complicated to follow. So again, the peg is realigned off-chain through financial institutions which serve as custodians of the commodity, this time back in the stablecoin instead of the fiat currency. And again, the amount of the exchange-traded commodity used to back the stablecoin, it has to reflect exactly the circulating supply of this stablecoin. It's redeemable for those metals at any time, just like the fiat-backed stablecoins are redeemable for fiat at any time. And the cost, similarly to the fiat ones, it's equivalent to the cost of maintaining the reserve of this precious metal plus the legal and business infrastructure side that is required to run this system. A few examples of those are the Digit gold token and Synthetics, which has other stablecoins as well. They are also releasing a stablecoin pegged to gold soon, if they haven't already. So advantages: backed by real assets, redeemable for those assets, and you can take possession of the real assets actually. So you're basically tokenizing metals. It is stable because the price of those commodities is relatively stable, with exceptions, of course. And they are liquid because the tokenization of those commodities, it brings greater liquidity and facilitates better price discovery for those commodities. Again, the disadvantages are the same. They are centralized. Third parties as vendors, custodians of the metals, and the project itself is needed to ensure the full functioning of the system. So that's a single point of failure, again, just like the fiat ones. The audit process for those is even harder than the fiat ones because those are not just some numbers in some bank accounts of the stablecoin team. Those are actual metals, and this is much harder to do. Right, third category is the crypto-backed stablecoins. Those are, again, the same as the previous two, but instead of having a fiat currency or some commodity to peg against, they are collateralized in other crypto or baskets of crypto, maybe more than one. So in most cases, how these work is they allow users to take out a loan against a smart contract via locking up collateral. So the gain there is that it's making it more worthwhile to pay off the debt if the stablecoin ever decreases in value. To prevent the loss of peg and crashes, a user who takes out a loan can be liquidated by the smart contract itself without a third-party intermediary, should the collateral decrease too close to the value of the withdrawal. This is to protect the actual peg and all the rest of the holders. So this time the peg is executed on-chain, that makes it a lot more transparent. There's no banks in the back holding reserves of fiat or commodities or anything like that. The supply is also regulated on-chain via smart contracts. And the price stability is achieved by supplementary instruments apart from the collateral, which work on the smart contract. So the technical aspects of all this crypto-backed stablecoins is a lot more complex. I will admit that I have read, for example, the DAI paper a few times, and I'm having trouble understanding 100% how it all works. So that's maybe a deterrent for some people. And it's also more prone to, as complexity increases, so do the possibility of bugs and issues in the smart contract code and the system in general. However, there's no third-party regulation. So this is a decentralized on-chain solution. However, a very large collateral must be maintained to ensure stability. And we have seen that with some of those coins already. Examples of those are Synthetics, which has SNX at the main token and SUSD at the stablecoin, and Maker, which has a DAI and the main token, the Maker, which is used as the same way as NSX. So advantages, really fast: decentralized, transparent, efficient. Everything happens on the blockchain, very fast, transparent again, and it's over levered. It's over collateralized because this is how the system works in order to maintain the peg. So disadvantages: this is more volatile than the fiat and commodity ones, because the underlying asset is itself a cryptocurrency, and that fluctuates as well. There is a risk of instant liquidation if the value falls below a certain threshold, and it's complex, as we said before. Finally, last one, these are algorithmic stablecoins. They are based on a paper called Senior Shares that was released in 2014. So they use a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, and that controls issuance and prices. Basically, the DAO mimics the central banks, which also control supply and interest rates and all the monetary characteristics of a normal fiat currency. They are fully digitalized. They have no collateral. The price and the supply, they're controlled only by the DAO. This is a fully decentralized solution. The regulation is made on-chain by the DAO. There's no need for any third-party regulation. For the same reason, they are very, very scalable. So the cost of price stability is very low for those coins. The peg, again, is realized on-chain. And how it works is, most of the times, the DAO will issue coins and burn coins depending on the market demand until the peg is reached. So if it goes up, it issues more coins, and if it goes down, it burns coins, limit the supply, bring the peg back up. So examples of this are BitShares, was the first one, and New Bits. We have seen both of them losing their peg dramatically. New Bits has never recovered. It's trading now at around 10 cents, I think, if I'm not mistaken. BitShares has retraced back to the peg, the BitUSD, which shows that most probably their system and market dynamics work a lot better, and as they should. That happened recently. There are other algorithmic stablecoins, newer, that aim to succeed where others have failed, like Terra, Carbon, Reserve. There was also Basis, but they didn't launch after all because they had some issues with the regulators, and they decided to abandon the project, actually. Right, so advantage is decentralized. Everything is made on chain. Everything is stored in a transparent ledger, no collaterals, and stable relatively, since the value is automatically adjusted by the DAO. Disadvantage is complex. Many of those are using complex oracles for price discovery, many complex mechanics that is not easy to explain to non-technical people. And also they have an issue with regulations because the way some of them work is by issuing bonds. So holders can just take the bond and promise to pay a specific price later on, which is basically very much like a security. This just happened to Basis. Still, this is the most experimental approach and most crypto native. It's closer to the trustless, decentralized system that we are all aiming for. There are many that believe that it cannot work. But if it does, I believe personally that this is the most interesting part in this whole area, the stable coins, and it can have a long-term change effect. It can affect the whole space in a very positive way. I think it will take some time until all the kinks are ironed out and a proper algorithmic model is 100% successful. So regarding now, baby, Koinomi, these are the tokens that are natively supported in the wallet. Many of those are also supported by the two native exchanges that are in our wallet, which is Changelly and Shapeshift. So users can trade in and out of all those. A bit more about our wallet. We've been around for 5 years. We've grown organically to 2 million users. We have a client out for every platform, and you enjoy 100% true ownership of Koinomi, completely non-custodial. You are the owner of your funds. We have no control, no access, and no knowledge of your wallets and funds. So yeah, that's it for me. I want to thank you for bearing with me. Maybe this was a long talk, maybe it was very technical compared to the previous one. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, and take care.
On the way, Angelos. We have some questions in the chat.
I hope I can listen to them because in the chat, yeah, definitely. Just a minute.
So yeah, there was a question about Tether.
Yes, I expected that. If it's, I would like to refrain from Tether discussion, especially if it's about the controversies that surround Tether. I mean, we all have our opinions. I think the data are widely available online for anyone to make their mind up.
No, I think the question was just like a general why Tether is still like a market leader.
Well, okay, I think it's mainly because of first mover advantage, as it's called. I mean, it was the first one and the most widely known one. But as you saw in my initial slides, the others are competing and they are closing up. I think it will depend on the ability of those other teams to work closely with big major exchanges just like Tether does. And yeah, I don't know how the story with Tether will play out. There's a lot of controversy. If it doesn't play out well, then the situation will change. Otherwise, I think it will remain, at least for now. One other thing I want to point out regarding Tether is that most of the other stablecoins are ERC20 tokens. Tether is an omni-layer token, which means it's built on top of Bitcoin, and it requires the fees and the 10-minute block situation of Bitcoin. So if someone is looking to have really fast and cheap stablecoin transactions, I wouldn't think that Tether is the one for him. I think any of the big fiat-backed ERC20 ones, like Trust Token and Paxos and USDC, even Gemini, are a much better fit for him.
I think that answers the question. Anybody has any more questions? We have some stablecoin guys there who.
Oh, okay.
But they seem to be busy. Any stablecoin or asset-backed? Yes, we have one. Okay. We'll have a break afterwards.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question is, how do some of these companies make a profit and able to cover the costs of their operations?
Yeah, that's a good question for them. I am not privy to their business models at all. So I think that maybe they can be the arbitrators themselves. So there's a profit there. But really, it's a good question, but really I don't have an answer for you. I really hadn't thought of that myself a lot. So apologies, but I don't have an answer for you for that. It would be interesting to find out, however.
Maybe somebody here has some clues or ideas or speculations that we can speculate on?
Well, some of them did have ICOs, right? And most of them have funding from private investors to expand and develop. But apart from that, the actual business model, I am not aware of.
Angela, it's Nikki here. Just as a complete guess, wouldn't they perhaps be investors in their own coin?
Sorry, can you repeat? Sorry.
Would they not perhaps be investors in their own coin?
They could be, but invest in a stable coin, I mean, it's always at the same value, approximately. It's not something like you can invest in your own coin and then the coin will do 10 times the value and you will win. So that's why I mentioned the arbitration part. I mean, if they are on their own to maintain the peg, at least on the fiat backed, they can gain there. But invest on the stablecoin itself, there's a very small profit margin, I think, unless the volumes are huge. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Could be.
really just a guess. I think aside from the DAO, the other ones are a bit of a cop-out, actually. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know without being very technical on how they work, I know that, for example, BitShares, they have a whole system with voting on chain and funding from the chain and how it all works. So at least for the algorithmic ones, the actual business model might be embedded in the code itself, in the smart contracts. That might, for example, I know that people working in BitShares are getting paid by the chain. So the chain is making money.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I cannot tell you how. I don't know. I really don't. there's good there's good material online for all this. I wanted to just have a brush through and just let people know about the various types and what's what.
Angelos, it's Robin here from Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you. It was a very informative talk. I'm curious, I'm in online payments, e-commerce payments. How do you see this, the stable coins becoming introduced into mainstream e-commerce payments?
Yeah, I think they have a big chance of doing that. I mean, on one hand, you have payment processors that can pay you out. You can accept cryptocurrencies and any cryptocurrency, not a stable coin like Bitcoin and Ether, and you can get the fiat value immediately on your account. But those, as far as I know, they're not cheap, and they're they're a lot more centralized. I mean, there's another middleman in the process. With stable coins, I think you can easily use them for e-commerce a lot easier than most major cryptocurrencies. First of all, because of the stability of the price, so you don't have to worry about adjusting or having a payment processor to change it into fiat and everything. And also because at least for the Ethereum-based ones, which is basically almost everything except Tether, Ethereum is an account-based coin, so you don't have you don't need multiple addresses. You can reuse the same address. One disadvantage I can think of is, of course, privacy. I mean, if I know your Ethereum address from the online shop that I paid, I can see every transaction that goes there by stablecoin or whatever else. But I think the stablecoins have a use case there. I mean, you can accept trust token, or you can accept Paxos, and you know that you 99.9% you got $1 when you got one Paxos. Maybe it's 99, maybe it's 1.01. I think it's a lot more stable that way. I hope I answered your questions. I just have insights on all this.
Yeah, we got a thumbs up, so I think you did answer. So
Thanks a lot.
thank you again, Angelos. We'll have a small break now.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot.
George wants to say something.
Hi guys, thank you very much, Angelos. Very informative session. I just want to give out some, let's say, notice to all the members that are participating here. We are just launching today the Cyprus Blockchain Association website, and you are free to come ahead and let's say register. In the case that you do, you will receive discounts for let's say EIMF or for the University of Nicosia and other educational let's say universities and centers. So if you go to blockchain.com.cy, you will find the website of the Cyprus Blockchain Association for Cyprus. And again, they are our media sponsors for the Bitcoin Club Cyprus. They are supporting us, and I just wanted to say that as a small interception. Now we'll have a small break for some coffee, some refreshments, and at the end of the session, we will also have some pizzas to honor the Bitcoin Pizza Day that was a few days ago. So if you want to have a few minutes break, this is the time to do so. Thank you, guys.
Here.
Excellent. So now, guys, we'll proceed to hear a little bit more from Daniel. He will explain a little bit about the Komodo platform, Komodo blockchain. I'm sure you're going to be delighted with what you're going to see and hear. So without any due delay, Daniel, the stage is yours. Please enlighten us.
All right, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you well. The microphone
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen. And so let's get started with the presentation. So I work for Komodo platform. I joined the team in January of 2018, sorry. So I've been with them for about a year and a half. And this is basically from a very high level what Komodo is. So we are an open modular multi-chain platform. So basically what that means is Komodo provides technology that allows you to create your own blockchain, and you can customize it. It's an independent blockchain. It has its own network, its own coin, and you can build applications that run on your very own blockchain. And so this is just our mission. And so essentially it's saying that we're committed to the global adoption of blockchain and trying to provide solutions that allow developers, startups, and enterprise to profitably adopt blockchain tech. So at the beginning here, I'm just going to run through some basic facts about the Komodo blockchain. So our current supply is about 113 million. The total supply is 200 million, and we will reach that in 2030, or roughly 2030. The current price is $1.31 US, although that's obviously, it fluctuates. The total market cap is 148 million, and we are about number 57 on CoinMarketCap. So this also fluctuates, but generally we're between 60 and 50. So our consensus mechanism is proof of work. And we use the Equihash algorithm, which is the same algorithm as Zcash. Komodo is actually a fork of Zcash at the beginning of the project. The security mechanism that we use is called delayed proof of work. And so there's a little bit of confusion sometimes. People think that delayed proof of work is actually our consensus rules. But we are a traditional proof of work chain, and delayed proof of work is an additional secondary consensus mechanism that just provides extra security. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about delayed proof of work in a few minutes. So if you don't know what that is, don't worry, you'll learn soon. So the block time for the Komodo blockchain is 1 minute. The block rewards are 3 KMD, and the max block size is 4 megabytes. All right, so just a little bit of history about Komodo. The project Komodo didn't start until 2016, but the developers, most of the development team on the Komodo team now, they all got involved in blockchain back in 2014. So back then, Komodo's lead developer, JL777, he developed a project called SuperNet, and that was on the NXT platform. So in 2015, essentially what happened was the NXT dev team decided to make some changes to the tech that would that essentially broke JL's code. So JL777 had spent the better part of a year and a half working on this SuperNet project, and then the platform that he was building on decided to make some changes that broke his project. And so this was a huge turning point for JL777, and he realized that these third-party projects building on a platform have no autonomy, they have no independence. So that led to him in February 2016. He published what we call now the Blockchain Declaration of Independence. And so that's essentially this here. He said, "We, the asset holders, hereby declare our independence from any single blockchain. An open and jointly developed specification on cross-chain atomic asset transfers," which, this was before the term atomic swaps had been coined. So essentially what he's talking about here are atomic swaps. Cross-chain atomic asset transfers will be developed. Any current or future blockchain is invited to join. Each blockchain will need to not only promise protections for asset holder interests, they need to live up to them. Otherwise, all the assets will simply move to the blockchains that do. So it's really, shows how forward-thinking James was for this time, for early 2016, recognizing the need for atomic swaps, the need for these interoperability standards efforts, and just in general, the need for third-party projects to have the independence and autonomy they need to successfully use blockchain technology. So just a little bit more history. So the ICO, Komodo's ICO was in October and November of 2016. We raised a total of 2,639 BTC. And at the time of the fundraise, that was a little bit under 2 million USD. So that's a pretty small fundraise, to be honest, on the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of projects that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Some of them have raised tens of millions, hundreds of millions. I think EOS raised 4 billion. Telegram was another one I think that had either over 1 or 2 billion. So a pretty modest ICO back in fall of 2016. And then the mainnet was launched in 2017 in January. So the mainnet has been live now for over 2 years. At the very beginning, Komodo's two main features were delayed proof of work security and zero knowledge privacy, which is the same privacy technology that Zcash uses. And then since then, it's just been nonstop development. So some of the things that we've developed since then: atomic swaps, independent blockchain generation, decentralized ICOs, infinite scaling, customized consensus framework, which I'll explain a little bit more about later, and then more. So these are just some of the big ones. All right, so all of Komodo's development is focused on these 4 different aspects. So security, scalability, interoperability, adaptability. And so it's important for us to understand what these things really mean, right? These are kind of popular industry buzzwords. Everybody talks about scalability. Everybody talks about interoperability. But it's not always clear what people mean. Sometimes marketing teams just throw those words around and they don't really explain what they mean or the features that they provide. So hopefully we're going to go into detail for each of these 4, and hopefully it all becomes clear. All right, so let's start with, actually this is just a little bit more information before we dive in. So security with Komodo, all blockchains in the Komodo ecosystem receive Bitcoin level security with delayed proof of work. And again, we're going to learn a little bit more about that in just a minute. Scalability. So essentially what we mean by scalability is the ability for a project to grow beyond their current state. So let's say that you launch a project, let's say like a CryptoKitties app. I think we're probably all familiar with CryptoKitties. And that's the famous example, right? Because the app became so popular that it essentially shut down the Ethereum network. So if you launch in a CryptoKitties style application on Komodo and it becomes extremely popular, your transactions are processed independently, so you can't slow down other projects in the ecosystem. And then at the same time, sorry, one second. At the same time, if you need to scale out and you need to grow, then you have the ability to add more blockchains to boost your performance. So interoperability, what we mean by this is the ability for blockchains in the Komodo ecosystem to communicate. And that can be exchanging value, or that can be exchanging logic. And so these blockchains can communicate with one another, and essentially, they can, if there's an application on one blockchain, that blockchain can ping a different blockchain with a different application, and they can exchange important information or data. So it adds value to the whole ecosystem. And then the last point here is adaptability, and essentially what we mean by that is the ability for projects to customize their blockchain. They can add the modules that they need, and then they can build the applications that their project was built for. All right, so delayed proof of work. Every hour, about 300,000 USD is spent on electricity for Bitcoin mining. So that is a ton of money. That's an enormous amount of money. And in some ways, it seems a bit wasteful. I think that that's been a huge criticism of blockchain, and especially for proof of work blockchains. So what Komodo's delayed proof of work security mechanism does, essentially, is it recycles the Bitcoin hash rate and allows an unlimited number of blockchains to receive the same level of security. So as I mentioned before, every dPow protected chain gets the same level of security as Bitcoin. And this is just from a very high level, this is how the process works. So first, there's a notarization from every third-party chain, from every dPow protected chain to Komodo. And then there's a notarization from Komodo to the Bitcoin ledger. And then there's a notarization from Bitcoin back to Komodo. And then finally from Komodo back to all the dPow protected chains. And so what a notarization is essentially is taking a piece of blockchain data. It's a block hash, for those of you that are familiar with that. So they take a block hash and using the OP return command, you can save a small piece of data with a transaction onto a blockchain. So that's essentially what that means. They're saving it from a very high level. What it is saving important blockchain data onto the Bitcoin blockchain for security purposes. And once a block has been notarized, the network will not accept any changes. They will not accept a reorganization of the blockchain that changes that block in particular, or any blocks that came before it. So that's why we say it's essentially the same level of security as Bitcoin. All right, so this is also important to note. dPow comes standard for all blockchains built with Komodo. But in addition, it's also available to any UTXO-based blockchain. So that covers a huge range of different blockchains. They don't have to be built with Komodo's technology in order to receive dPow security. So a couple of good examples are game credits, which I think is a top 400 coin on CoinMarketCap, Einsteinium, which is a top 200 coin, and Jin coin, which I'm not sure where they are, but also a pretty reputable project. So dPow is currently protecting more than 40 blockchains. The majority of those 40 blockchains are within the Komodo ecosystem, meaning that those blockchains were created with Komodo's technology. But I think there's 5 or 6 external blockchains that are also using dPow. So it's dPow is protecting several $100 million in value. And not too long ago, Einsteinium actually experienced a real 51% attack after they had integrated dPow. So this was actually really interesting because dPow defended. It stopped the attack, right? So this is a statement that the Einsteinium Foundation released after the attack. The network experienced a real 51% attack. Komodo dPow that we implemented in our code recently kicked in and protected the chain. We are very pleased that the solution worked well and that Einsteinium chain is protected from any attacks in the future. So, you know, it's a proven solution, essentially, is the point that we're making here. It's something that's been battle tested, and now there's some other 51% attack prevention features being pushed out on other projects that use a similar style solution, essentially notarizing and saving blockchain data on different blockchains, specifically the Bitcoin blockchain. But yeah, dPow has been around since 2017 and it's been proven. So, all right, yeah, we'll move on. So blockchain clustering scaling solution. This is the second of Komodo's 4 pillars, which is about scalability. So we'll start with the basics. One blockchain launched with Komodo's technology can process about 200 transactions per second. So that's actually quite a bit. But if a project needs more than that, they can add more chains. So like I was saying earlier about the CryptoKitties example, if you create a CryptoKitties and let's say that you need more than 200 transactions per second for your app to function, then you can just add more blockchains and synchronize them with your first blockchain, and you will increase your throughput linearly, right? So we call this a blockchain cluster. And it's important to note the linear factor is actually really important because there's no decrease in returns. If you have one chain, you get 200 transactions per second. 2 chains is 400 transactions per second, and so on. And there's no limit to the number of chains that can exist in a blockchain cluster. And I'll say something more about that in just a minute. So as I just noted, you increase throughput linearly. If you need 2,000 transactions per second, you just create 10 chains. And so you might be thinking, if I have 10 chains, doesn't that increase the coin supply every time that a block is mined? You know, let's say that so like with Komodo, the block rewards are 3 KMD per block, right? So if you have 10 chains, then you might think, well, that means all of a sudden every block that's created, now there's 30 KMD, right, in block rewards being distributed. But that's actually not the case, because there's a burn protocol. And so essentially what that means is it just burns the coins that you don't want to be created. So if you want your block rewards to stay constant at 3 KMD, for example, in this example, if you have 10 blockchains and each one is creating 3 coins, I won't say KMD, but let's say you have 10 blockchains and each block is creating 3 coins, so you have 30. Well, you can burn 27 and keep the block rewards constant so that you're not inflating your supply. So that's how this works. It's essentially tethering a number of different blockchains together and allowing them to increase your performance while not inflating the coin supply. All right, so this is what I was going to mention just a minute ago about there being no limitations on the number of blockchains that can exist in a cluster. So here we have just a little diagram. So you can see Bitcoin is about 7 or 8 transactions per second. Ethereum is probably 15 to 20. You know, you have Dash 60, Litecoin 70, Bitcoin Cash is around 80. PayPal is about 200 transactions per second. Ripple at 1,500. Visa globally, 24,000 transactions per second. And Komodo in a blockchain cluster of approximately 1,000 blockchains, we had 45,000 transactions per second. So this was not on the main net. This was not with a real live coin. It was not with a live currency, but the solution was proven. So we know the technology works. And you know, it's a pretty huge achievement. And yeah, so we have yet to implement this, but it's available to any projects that build with Komodo and might need that kind of scalability. All right, so now on to cross-chain communication and interoperability. So first things first, there's a couple of different aspects, like I was saying before, to interoperability. One might be exchange of value. Another might be an exchange of logic. And Komodo essentially has both, so I'll explain both. First of all, there's some built-in interoperability features. So all the blockchains in the Komodo ecosystem, you can use one passphrase or one private key to access your wallets for all the different blockchains, which is actually a really cool feature because it means that you have a single address to receive coins from any Komodo-based blockchain. So any blockchain created with Komodo's technology, you can use one address for all of them. And so you don't have to manage, you know, for example, 5 or 10 different addresses. You just use the same one across all different coins. And so that's a really, really neat feature. And I think it makes blockchain much easier for, you know, just everyday people to use. It promotes adoption because it's just not so, maybe not so complicated, not so intimidating. And so in terms of, actually, yeah, there's one point down here in this box to the left of the diagram that I should mention. So even though all of these different blockchains use a single address, and you can use a single private key to access all of your different wallets, it's important to note that all these chains are fully independent. And so they're not side chains, they're not child chains, they're not tethered or tied or dependent on the Komodo chain or KMD in any way. So each chain has its own network, its own consensus rules, its own algorithm, it's got its own coin, and the transaction fees on every blockchain are paid in that blockchain's coin. So you never have to use KMD. You're never forced to pay transaction fees or pay gas fees in KMD. But so despite this huge level of autonomy and independence, we still have all these really cool interoperability features, which is something that no other platforms can really offer. All right, so moving on. So this is going to be more about the cross-chain logic. So we have cross-chain transaction verifications, which is important if you need to see that, say that you have one blockchain with a smart contract or an application, and you need to know that a certain payment was made or a certain smart contract was executed on a different blockchain in the ecosystem. Well, you can just ping that blockchain and find out. So it's pretty easy for these chains to interact and communicate with one another, including state changes for contracts and modules. And so this is just a little example down here next to the diagram to the left. Suppose one blockchain-based app provides a foreign currency exchange data stream. So like an Oracle, right? It's taking off-chain data and it's importing it onto the blockchain. And then let's say that there's other blockchains with other applications in the ecosystem that want to use that data stream. They want to know the exchange rate between, let's say euros and British pounds. Well, so if you have an application that needs that data, even if you don't have an Oracle on your blockchain, you can ping the other blockchain's Oracle and say, hey, what's the exchange rate right now between euros and British pounds? And your blockchain will receive the data in real time. So that's what we mean by cross-chain communication, cross-chain logic. And it really, so what it does is it helps to add value to the whole ecosystem. So every project that builds is potentially providing value that other projects can leverage, and other, it's all open source. All these other projects can collaborate and work together to build more powerful applications. All right, and so finally we have cross-chain atomic swaps, and this is where exchanging value cross-chain comes into play. And so value, essentially what I mean by value here, value can mean other things, but what I mean by value here is coins and tokens, right? Trading assets. And so atomic swaps, for those of you that might not be familiar, are peer-to-peer trades of crypto, of digital assets. And so right now, the way that things work, typically you have to, I'm sure that all of you know this, but if you want to use an exchange, you have to send your funds from your private wallet, from the wallet where you control your private keys. You have to send those funds to your wallet on the exchange, where then you no longer control the private key, right? It's in the exchange's wallet, and you're allowed to make trades, but you don't actually hold the funds at that point. And so if the exchange gets hacked and all the funds get stolen, you might not get that money back. And we've seen that happen recently quite a bit. In 2018 alone, there was an estimated 1 billion USD stolen from centralized crypto exchanges. So we're talking about a lot of money. And some of these exchanges were able to reimburse their users. Like for example, with the recent Binance hack, I think they lost about 40 million in Bitcoin. And CZ famously said, we're taking it out of the SAFU fund, and they covered it with company funds. But there's also been cases where the exchanges have to declare bankruptcy and they shut down, and then nobody gets their money back, right? So it's a huge security risk when centralized exchanges hold all of this wealth in a couple of super high value wallets. It's the perfect target, for hackers who are trying to steal money. And that's why atomic swaps are so important, because you trade peer-to-peer, which essentially means you're trading from within your wallet. So the funds never leave your wallet until the moment that they do. And when the funds that you want to trade away disappear, that very instant, the funds that you're receiving will appear in your wallet as well. So it's just far more secure. You control your own funds, and it eliminates all of these risks for traders and for exchanges. A little bit more information here. So Komodo has atomic swap technology that supports 99%, or I should say can support 99% of all coins and tokens out there. And it's fully peer-to-peer, it's direct trading, no middlemen. And there's direct trading pairs, or I should say there can be direct trading pairs between any two listed assets. So like, for example, right now, if you have an ERC20 token, let's say Tron, or actually, I don't think Tron is an ERC20 anymore. Let's say OMG. So if you have OMG and you want to trade that for, let's say Komodo, typically you would have to trade the OMG for ETH, and then you could swap the ETH for KMD. And so it's the same for many smaller market cap coins. They might only have 1 or 2 trading pairs. And so if you want to trade from altcoin to altcoin, you have to make several steps along the way. Whereas with atomic swaps, it's just direct trading pairs between any listed assets where there's demand. So if there's no demand, then there's no liquidity and there won't be a market. You know, if it's like some very, very obscure, you know, very low market cap coin, well, there might not be demand for that coin between every other listed asset. But the point is that there could be. So there's no limits to the trading pairs. It's essentially you just place whatever orders you want. And if other people accept them, then other people accept them. And if not, then you can change your orders to something that might have a bit more liquidity. And so Komodo's 3rd generation DEX is entering the beta phase this week. So unfortunately, we don't have a link yet. The download is not quite available. But if you guys want to be a part of the beta, I encourage you to just keep an eye out. We're going to be releasing some stuff at the end of this week and early next week. So the DEX is going to be out very, very soon, and it's going to be huge. It's going to really revolutionize the way that all trading takes place. It's just going to be more secure. It's going to be more convenient. And importantly, one aspect that I haven't mentioned yet is this new technology that Komodo is working on. It's going to be an open standards effort. And so there will be an open API, and we're going to encourage other wallet providers to use that API to integrate DEX functionality. Same with exchanges. If exchanges want to adopt atomic swap technology so that they can decrease their liability, they can do that as well. And so the cool thing is that there will be a shared liquidity pool. So you can essentially think of it as Komodo's atomic swap technology. It's going to be lying in the back-end code. And then there can be a number of different products and applications that use that same back-end. And so there will be different GUIs, like a different UX UI. And you know, you might be using a certain wallet, or you might be using a different exchange. But if they're using the same back-end, then they all share the same liquidity. So if somebody is using exchange A and I'm using exchange B, I can place an order with atomic swap technology on exchange B, and somebody else can accept that order on exchange A if they're both integrated to Komodo's atomic swap technology. So it's going to be very, very cool. We're excited. You guys should definitely keep an eye out, and the product will be out in just less than a week now. All right, so this is the last of the 4 technology pillars that we're discussing here. This one is adaptability. And so essentially here, what we mean by adaptability is the ability to customize your own blockchain, the ability to choose the modules you need, the features you need, and build the applications that your project was designed to build. And we make all this incredibly easy. It's very straightforward, and to be honest, it's more flexibility than any other platform is offering right now. It's miles ahead of smart contract platforms, and even for other multi-chain platforms. There's starting to be a number of multi-chain platforms now, and this is still just far more flexibility than what some of these other guys can offer. So let's get into the details here. I think right now this probably seems a bit unclear, but I'll show you guys what we mean. So step 1, when you're launching a blockchain with Komodo's technology. So essentially, right now, if you feel comfortable using a command line, using the CLI, all you need to launch a blockchain with Komodo's technology is 2 computers. That's it. It's free, it's permissionless, You don't need to pay. You don't need to communicate with the Komodo team. You just download the software and you launch it. And so here's all the things that you can customize. You can, of course, you can choose your ticker. So like, you know, the name that appears on exchanges and CoinMarketCap and things like that. You can choose your consensus rules. So if you want it to be proof of work, it can be proof of work. If you want it to be proof of stake, it can be proof of stake. And the cool thing is you can also choose any combination of the two. So it can be, you know, 20% proof of work and 80% proof of stake, or it can be 50-50. It can really be anything you want. In terms of the algorithm, you can choose from Equihash, which, as I mentioned before, that's the same algorithm that Komodo uses. And it's also the, like I mentioned before, the same algorithm as Zcash. Or you can use VerisHash. And so VerisHash is a GPU-friendly algorithm that essentially levels the playing field between GPUs and FGPAs. You can choose your block time if you want it to be 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. You can choose your block time, block rewards. It can be 0.00001 if you want it to be extremely small and essentially offer no block rewards, or you can make it very high. It's completely customizable. Custom coin emissions, and so what I mean by this, typically with blockchains, block rewards decrease over time. So I think it was mentioned in the first presentation, like about a year from now, the Bitcoin halving will take place when the block rewards will decrease by 50%. And so they decrease, I think, I'm not exactly sure how often, but it's a certain number of blocks. And every, however many blocks it is, the block rewards will decrease by 50%. And so with this custom coin emissions option, if you want, you can have your block rewards increase over time. So obviously this would cause more inflation, but you can also have an end to it. So maybe for the first, this is just an example. Let's say from block 0 to block 500,000, you want block rewards to be 3 coins per block. And then let's say from 500,000 to block 1 million, you want the block rewards to be 6 coins. And then from block 1 million on, you want it to be 1. You know, from 1 million to 2 million, you want it to be 1 coin per block. You can do that with Komodo. So a really cool option. It's, again, it's just a customization feature that no one is really offering. I'll run through the rest of these pretty quickly. So privacy features, you can choose whether you want your blockchain to be fully transparent, fully public. You can make zero knowledge transactions optional. So zero knowledge proofs, that's the privacy technology developed by Zcash. If you want that, you can make it optional, or you can make it mandatory, meaning all transactions must be private. All 3 of those are possible. Pre-mine supply, so if you want to have an ICO, you can choose how many coins are created on the first block. Founders rewards and inflationary taxation. This is essentially if you want to add a small fee that gets created with every single block or every single transaction, you can do that, and it can be transferred to an account or a wallet of your choosing. Obviously, this is inflationary because it's creating additional coins, but it is a way for projects to fund development if it's a very, very small, you know, a very small taxation, and maybe if they didn't have an ICO, it can be, you know, 0.001 coins per block or something. It can be anything that you want, really. Reward reduction, so you get to choose how often the block rewards decrease and by what percentage. And then the last thing here, modules and contracts. So we're going to talk about a bit more about that now. So these are what Komodo calls custom consensus modules. And so there's a bunch of different options. Tokens, you can create tokens on your own blockchain. So if there's been many, many projects that have created ERC20 tokens, but you're creating the tokens on the Ethereum blockchain. So you're not creating these tokens. If you create ERC20, you're not creating them on your own blockchain. You're creating them on somebody else's blockchain and paying gas fees in that blockchain's coin instead of your own. So with Komodo, you can create your own blockchain, transaction fees are paid in your coin, and in addition, you can create tokens on your very own chain, including non-fungible tokens. We have trustless price feeds, which is essentially what I mentioned earlier with the foreign exchange example. But this can be done in a way that's decentralized so that every node on the network is approving this rate to avoid manipulation. We have rewards, which provides something similar to masternode functionality. You can lock a certain number of coins into a wallet for a certain period of time, and in return, you're given some additional coins. We have a proxy token DEX solution, instant micropayments, MUSIG payments, which is a new technology. It's a new form of multiple signature payments where it uses less data, saves less data on the blockchain, provides more privacy, and at the same time, you can have essentially an unlimited number of signers for any transaction. We have oracles, we have algorithmic stablecoins. There was just a really great presentation about stablecoins, so you guys are all familiar with that. We have quantum security, which is it's securing all blocks and transactions from theoretical quantum computing attacks. We have a built-in crypto faucet, DICE functionality, and a funds recovery solution. So these are all of the modules that are available right now. And so all of these are actually built in. So if you create a chain with Komodo, all you have to do is choose which modules you want to activate. And then you can do that. You can just activate the modules that you need to use, and then they're automatically there on your chain. It doesn't take any additional development. It doesn't take any additional resources from the projects that want to build. These are just things that are there and available for anybody that wants to use blockchain. All right, so finally, step 3. So just a quick recap. So we've got step 1, you customize your blockchain. Step 2, you choose the desired modules and activate them. And then step 3, you can either, if you want, you can code custom modules, right? So these are the built-in modules. But if you want, you can write your own. They're written in C and C++, so they can support Turing-complete code, which means they can run any kind of software. Essentially, anything that any other program or software or application does, you can write that into a module, and it will run on your blockchain. And so that's just a huge, huge, huge innovation. And one last thing to mention about these modules, it only takes one transaction fee to run a module. So that's significant because if you run a smart contract on typical smart contract platforms, you have to pay a gas fee for every process, which essentially means for every line of code, you have to pay a little fee. So if you have a very complex application with many, many lines of code, it becomes extremely expensive to run that on a blockchain. Whereas with Komodo, you have your own chain, transaction fees are paid in your coin. All you have to do is pay one transaction fee, and then the whole module will run. So really just enormous, significance to the CC modules. And then if you're not, if you have no desire to write your own modules, if that's just not something that you're capable of or something that you're not interested in doing, well, you don't have to. You can just start building applications on your blockchain using RPC calls. And so each of these modules in the library, each one provides some different RPC calls. And so you can start building blockchain-based applications just using those RPC calls. So it can be done in any programming language. You don't have to mess with blockchain engineering. You don't have to develop any consensus rules. You don't have to mess with the actual blockchain tech. You can just launch a chain and start building the applications that you want. So it just really drastically decreases the amount of development time that projects need to invest in order to start creating blockchain-based products. All right, so just a couple last points here. That's pretty much it. But just a couple last points. So Komodo is very well known for innovating at the cutting edge of the blockchain industry. So, we're really leading and doing some very experimental and cutting edge stuff. The development it moves very, very quickly, and the team is constantly releasing new features, new updates. And so essentially all this makes Komodo's tech future-proof because of the constant innovation and development. But even in the event that something happens to Komodo, for whatever reason, Komodo just drops off the face of the planet, ceases to exist, the Komodo network shuts down, the blockchain shuts down. All of the projects that built with Komodo's technology will continue to exist. And so that's really significant as well, because there's literally no dependency on Komodo. So that is essentially the presentation. Thank you guys very much. I'm happy to have been able to join in. And I just want to open the floor up for any questions that you guys might have.
Also, who might have some questions? That was like a super interesting platform discussion. I think we will come to the end. We'll come to the end, but those guys have some questions. He looks like he wants to ask the question.
So you said that there is no permission that I need to receive from Komodo blockchain, so I can start operate my own blockchain. Is that true?
Yeah, 100% true. So if you want, you can go to developers.komodoplatform.com. And so those are our dev docs. And so essentially all you need is 2 different computers, 2 different servers. And you download the Komodo daemon, which is essentially, it's the same as running the Komodo blockchain in native mode. So you have to sync the whole chain. It might take, depending on your connection, maybe a day. And then once you have that, the instructions are on developers.komodoplatform.com. You can have your own chain up and running in maybe 15 to 20 minutes.
Thank you. One last question from me. Keeping in mind all the developments that are happening so fast, where do you see Komodo platform in the next 2 to 5 years?
Wow, good question. It's pretty hard to say. I mean, right now we are preparing, like I mentioned earlier, we are releasing a new atomic swap powered DEX. So I think that that's going to be huge. That will definitely be a main focus for Komodo for the next several years for sure. And in addition to that, I think that we're just going to keep expanding. We will continue to expand upon the features and the customization options that we offer to projects that build with Komodo. So all of our development is basically trying to create the most ideal ecosystem or platform for other projects to build in. So we think, we have a very long-term vision, and we think that the adoption of blockchain is only going to increase, and it's going to start accelerating. And so we're trying to create as many customization features as we can. I mentioned the custom consensus modules. The development team is very focused on building new modules to provide more functionality. So yeah, I think that that's probably where I see Komodo headed, focusing on the DEX and then just creating more modules and more features for the projects that build with Komodo.
Thank you for that. Do you have any more questions? I think everybody has been, because the pizza was brought in before you started talking, and I think the smell of the pizza just...
Oh yeah, I don't want to hold you guys up from the pizza if that's ready to go.
Yeah, I think we'll make, Moniz will have a technical analysis talk after we have the pizza. I think pizza changes the schedule now. Plus, we'll see how the graphs jump. That way people won't be falling asleep. Make sure you have coffees afterwards. Reminder that we'll go for some beers if anybody's interested in Alasi afterwards. So Daniel, thank you for the presentation. And I saw that.
Yeah, no, thanks guys. Thanks very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
One question from my end. At the bottom of your presentation, it says confidential proprietary information. How confidential is it?
It's actually, sorry, it is not. It is not. That's that's just part of the theme, part of the template that I used. So no need to worry about that. You guys are free to share all the information that I shared with you.
Thanks. Thank you, Daniel.
No problem. Thanks.
Thanks for sponsoring our event today, and thank you for the love that Komodo has shown to the secret community. And we're all very appreciative of the input, the efforts that you put on the banners, the marketing, everything that you've done to make this happen today.
For sure. Yeah, no, we're happy to collaborate with you guys. So yeah, thanks a bunch, Moise.
Have a good one.
All right, thanks, guys.
So before we continue with Peter, I just want to give the mic to Dimitris, who's basically responsible for the meetups that happen in Paphos, and he would like to give you some information about the meetup taking place tomorrow.
Hi everyone. If you're in Paphos tomorrow, I want to invite you for some more pizza. It's pizza day. It's at 6 p.m. at the Jungle co-working space. And you can also Google us as a Paphos Bitcoin meetup. See you there.
All right, so I suggest we have a small break for pizza, and then if you guys are up to it, we can continue with the last part, okay?